It means the ministry's interfering at Hogwarts.
You're not going mad. You're just as sane as I am.
I must not tell lies.
You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase? Come quietly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We're doing Chapter 7, The Ministry of Magic. Anna is on the episode for the first time in Order of the Phoenix.
Yes! Hi, Emo Harry. Yay.
Let's just throw you right under the bus to start. What are some of your non-spoilery thoughts about Order of the Phoenix?
I fall down on Jen's side. It is my least favorite of the 7 books. Not, least favorite Harry Potter book. Obviously, I still think it's a great book. Lots of things to like.
It's a good distinction.
Emo Harry is not my favorite. It's just not.
Any reason particularly why?
You went through some stuff. Be emo. Like Elizabeth said, he's a teenage angst. That's fine. But he doesn't seem to want to try and help himself despite his support group as the book goes on. So as you get deeper into the book and emo Harry's still around, that's when I start to get annoyed.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Is it the teenage emotion itself? Can you understand where Harry is coming from and where that emotion exists? Or is it literally just reading about the emotion? You know what I'm saying?
That's a good question. It's probably not my favorite thing to read because I'm one of those people who when I watch or read something that's super awkward, I immediately feel that awkwardness and emo-ness like it's my own. So
yeah.
I don't enjoy experiencing it as I'm reading it. I do think that's part of it. The first part, which you were saying, it's not that I can't understand where it's all coming from as I'm reading it. Again, I think it's mostly that he's not finding coping mechanisms for himself as the book goes on, and he's just staying in that place that he's in. But whatever, he's 15, so I think it's more the latter to answer your question.
Fair enough. I think that's an important distinction to make, and that's fine if that's the case for anybody reading Order of the Phoenix. If you're just not a fan of that style of writing, that's just a personal preference choice. To me, I'm not going to argue that because, again, personal preference, but I think that's a testament to the author's writing.
Oh, yeah.
To make you then feel those things. I'm that's really good writing. Whether you like it or not is, I guess, the question. But
I've got a lot of things to say about J.K. Rowling, but one thing you got to give the woman is she's a great writer.
In this particular series. That's a debate for another day. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about in this chapter because, again, I'm stunned that it's taken this long to get you on an episode for a book. So you have a lot to comment on.
This is true.
We've had some debates and we've had some things to discuss.
My goodness, ladies.
Yeah, we got some stuff. Opinions will be aplenty. So, but first, let's get to this chapter, which involves the Ministry of Magic. Harry starts out at Grimmauld Place, where he wakes up at, I think, 5:30.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How? I cannot understand.
He felt like someone was screaming in his ear.
Okay, well, first of all, my first issue is going back to how he is as a character at this point in time, ahead of a hearing that you're going to have. I honestly probably wouldn't have slept at all anyway. My anxiety would have been through the roof.
Agreed.
So it's a miracle that he even got to sleep in the first place.
Agreed.
But then to just literally magically wake up at 5:30? I don't know how he does it. But he has a little interaction at Grimmauld Place beforehand. And I do mean little interaction because he is zoned out for it. As much as he wanted to be having a seat at the table with everybody else.
Well,
earlier.
I think that's to be
understood
too.
It's an understandable emotional response.
He might have slept, but he's still anxious as can be.
Mm-hmm.
Toast just sawdust in his mouth, and I don't even know why they tried to feed him.
Right. They even had an interesting conversation, though, because Lupin was asking some interesting questions that I think if he was not in an anxiety-ridden state, he would have been like, ooh, that's an interesting thing.
Which I do think Lupin even... I think that was a conscious decision on Lupin's part. Maybe not the subject matter, but just to continue on with the conversation they had already been having. Because I know there was like a line that like when Harry walked in, Lupin looked at him for a moment and then just continued talking to Tonks. So I think this is one of Lupin's moments where he like knows, okay, we're not going to fuss over Harry. We're not going to like, Harry needs to feel anxious and we're just going to talk and try and be normal.
Yeah. Essentially, the rest of the chapter is going to the Ministry of Magic, and we get a description of the process of getting in through the visitor's entrance. We get a description of the main atrium lobby area, however you want to describe it.
Atrium is the word they use.
And then we get a description of different floors, which we will give you, and some inside, behind the scenes, if you will.
Take your child to work day.
Kinda, yeah. Where we get some of the offices that are being used. So, and there's some interesting conversations to have there as well. So, as Arthur is traversing the Muggle world, you get this kind of dichotomy between magic and technology, in a sense. And, you know, the real world application is like magic is just something that science hasn't proven yet, or is that the phrase?
You mean like from a Muggle perspective?
Yeah.
Like
something we can't understand.
We think of as like magic or
right.
the Force.
But there's some scientific thing to explain it.
Well, there's some people who would say no.
I'm sure there's a lot. That's the general cliche phrase.
Yes.
But now we're like getting into it because Arthur has a bunch of these questions. He doesn't know how to handle Muggle currency. I think he has this moment where the machine is out of order and Harry's like,
and
it's
he
not
still
working.
thinks it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting Arthur moment. And then you see more of it in his office, which we'll get to a little bit later. So the visitor entrance, which is a tourist spot in London. If you know the ins and outs of London, you can see the phone booth. One of those, yes, kids, phone booths existed. Yes. Where you can actually go in.
Collect calls were a thing.
Yep. And I'm sure I can't imagine how many people. I'm sure the 62442 buttons are completely worn out. They
for sure. I did it myself.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask you, how long was it before you realized the 262442 spelled out magic?
Oh.
Because I think it took me putting in the code in a London phone booth to figure out, oh my God, it's magic. I promise I'm an intelligent person, everyone.
I feel like this is one of those memes. And please tell us if you're just listening to this now and she just dropped that knowledge on you. And I feel like it's one of those memes where I was today years old when.
Yes, yeah. Oh my God, did you not realize it?
I don't think I ever, like.
Yes.
But to your point, it's until you put in the number, you probably wouldn't even think of it.
Right, exactly.
Because that's what I did. I'd never even really thought twice of it. But if I had to press it in, I'd be like, wait a second. Yeah. So, well, there you go. The more you know.
Fun fact.
So the code is 62442, and then that ride down is an interesting just experience. And then you get dropped off to the Ministry of Magic, which I feel like is an important description just to get that visual sense of what they're walking into with the dark wooden walls and floor, the fireplaces lining it's just lining the one wall? No, it's lining both walls because there's entry and exit.
Yeah. Yes. I have a question for you about the fireplaces.
Yeah.
Do you think those wizards and witches who that's their transportation to and from work, do they have to pay to be connected to the Flu Network? Like, is it like, like a cable subscription? It's like a Flu Network subscription. That's
a fantastic question. And if they're not being charged, I feel like the Ministry of Magic is missing out here on an opportunity.
For sure. Somebody is.
I will say this, though. I definitely think you have to be registered for it.
Well, no, because remember in Goblet of Fire, Arthur makes some sort of statement about, like, I had the Dursleys' fireplace connected to the network for the day.
Yeah.
That he had some friend contact in the flu department. So, like, obviously you do have to get special, like, government approval, whatever.
It's like
to sign
tracked
up and
in some way, yeah.
Like, connected to it.
But I feel like to get into the ministry especially, like, that requires a next level up of, like, security clearance, if you will. Like, you're going to the place of...
so, because there clearly isn't... You can apparate into it, too.
That's true, yeah.
And I mean...
Maybe. So, I mean, yes, there definitely is a base level of registration that needs to go on for all flu networks. But yeah, I guess that's true. If you could just apparate inside the atrium anyway. Also, that seems odd that you'd just be like...
Agreed.
Oh, I would want to visit the White House today. Apparate. Like, I feel like that's just odd.
The White House isn't letting that happen.
No.
But that's true.
It's like place of government. Let's just go right to the center of it. It's weird. I don't know. Do you want to get into the main attraction of the atrium?
I'm here for whatever. I distracted you with my flu comment, so...
You did. But that's a fair point.
Take it from here.
So we have the fountain at the center of the atrium. And there's a depiction of a tall wizard, or the wizard is the tallest of the statues.
Yes.
Then you have a witch that's the second tallest. Then you have centaur, goblin, and house elf. And all of the creatures, being the centaur, goblin, house elf, are all looking up at the witch and wizard. Now, if you want to get into our AP English of it all...
Which I think we need to.
I think we need to. There's obviously some political things that she's getting at here. First of all, can I just say right out the bat, I'm stunned that they even have a house elf in this thing.
True.
I think that's a big win for house elves to even be on this thing, considering how, like, they're generally treated.
Yeah, that's true. But I think it is just, like, the only reason is because, I mean, why then would they even have a centaur and a goblin on there? Like, I think they're literally just trying...
Well, Anna, the Goblin Rebellion of 1791.
At the Witch and Wizard. Like, they're not... It's not so much that it's that overthought. It's that it doesn't matter what level you are, servant to free creature, you're looking up at us.
I think Goblin and Centaur have to be on there, because I think they've presented enough problems to the general wizarding world where it's like, no, we are going to be represented or else we're causing problems.
But it's not like any of them are represented in the government. There's a
That's
goblin
true.
liaison office,
Right.
But that's it.
No, you're true.
So how many goblins or centaurs are even walking in to see this fountain?
Well, and I think if you remember the centaurs from book 1, so I'm not spoiling anything, but like Bane and Ronan, I'm sure if you went into the Forbidden Forest and asked them their 2 cents on the Ministry of Magic, I'm sure you wouldn't get very light, airy, pleasant responses. I'm sure they'd have a lot to tell you. And I'm sure if you walked into Gringotts and asked them what they thought about their position in the Wizarding Realm, I'm sure they would have a bunch to tell you about it too. I don't think they're happy.
No. Yeah.
But they're in a different position, I think, because they're still technically independent beings.
Being paid.
Right. Or allowed to be doing whatever they want to do. House elves aren't. They're still generally enslaved.
Well, because they're brainwashed to not even realize it is enslavement.
Which just surprises me that they even have... Like, who made that decision to be like...
I had that question too. When was it built and who built it? Because it is, like you said, clearly trying to make a statement.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous, but...
I'm just throwing this out there. Do you think, since we're talking about the creatures looking up at the witch and wizard, do you think there's any symbolism in the witch still being below the wizard?
Oh, Dan. It's in my notes.
Okay.
Of course I do.
Okay. I agree. For the record, I agree.
I was going to bring it up. I was figuring, the creatures to me are the obvious problem with the statue, the obvious misrepresentation.
An egregious. That's an egregious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the witch is significantly lower. But also read the descriptions that are given to both the wizard and the witch. The wizard, who is tallest, is described as noble, while the witch is described as beautiful. why. Like, I feel like, you know, we didn't know what we know about JK now. But going through and rereading a lot of As Intensely as We Are, which we keep talking about, a lot more problematic issues with JK have been popping out at me. And I feel like this is one of them. Just kind of those subconscious biases, stereotypes, that gender roles that she puts in.
Do you think that's her personal thoughts and biases? Or do you think she's commenting on social norms?
With the creatures, I think, yes, she's commenting on social norms. The witch and wizard, I think, is unconscious.
Okay. You and I have had the conversation before regarding like Sirius and Molly.
Right.
Of how should parents be represented? How should they interact with children, whether be it their own or others? And that gender norm.
And I think that's one of the things that started opening my eyes, and I'm just spotting it more throughout her writing now, is her seemingly, I think she must really believe in these gender norms, because the way they're being included in the books, they don't feel like they're making specific points. They feel like this is just how she views the world.
So you don't think it's at all that just men are generally taller than women?
No.
I agree. No, I agree with you. No, I agree with you completely.
Yes, men are generally taller than women, but in a statue like that,
no, I agree.
If you cared, you could make them of equal height.
I completely agree with you. You're right. You're 100% right. No, it jumped out to me too. The whole thing was odd, and I don't think it's a mistake. I think,
none of it's she's clearly trying to make
purposeful.
a commentary with the fountain.
Also, note of the fountain is the change that gets dropped in the pool are donations to St. Mungo's, which I think is interesting. And that's kind of taking I mean, gosh, if you've ever been to a public fountain or, I was in Disney at the Big Thunder Railroad, and they had a creek, and there's probably like $1,000 in this creek of just change.
Well, we didn't even go to Cinderella's Wishing Well. I can only
imagine. Yeah. So, I mean, there she's taking something from the real world and just dropping it right into the wizarding world.
At least they use it for good things.
Yeah. Well, they say it's going to St. Mungo's. Who knows? That's me being very suspicious of the Ministry of Magic.
Fair enough. They've earned that.
Yeah. Wonder why I would have that opinion. So we get past the atrium and we get on the lift.
Oh, wait, before we get on the lift.
Okay.
You're skipping over Eric, the security guard. And I have questions.
I'm so sorry.
About Eric, the security guard, Dan.
This is the most Anna thing ever.
I'm sorry, but it is. I wanted to know. All right. So, in case you don't remember Eric, the security guard, Harry had to go and present his wand to him. But he also took what is described as a long golden rod and scanned Harry front and back with it.
Mm-hmm.
What was it looking for? Wizards don't have guns. Wizards don't have metal detonators for bombs. What was he? Because he did something different with Harry's wand. What exactly was the purpose of the long golden rod?
Maybe it's just a dark magic detector, specifically. Like anything that's dark magic specific.
Okay, now that you just said that, now I'm thinking concealment charms. To see, is he trying to mask his actual appearance?
That could be it. Invisibility cloak. Like something
all right,
like...
This makes me feel better. Okay, see, this is why I wanted to ask. Thank you.
I'm so happy.
I also have another question about Eric, the security guard, for the spoiler section.
Okay, all right. Okay. I did not see this happening at all. So, there you go.
Fun trivia question for you. What is the security guard's name? I'll stop distracting you now.
So now we get on the lift and we go through. I'm just going to give descriptions of the different floors. We have level 7, which is magical game and sport, British and Irish Quidditch, gobstones, and ludicrous patents.
Yeah. Why are patents ludicrous?
Like, what would define it as a ludicrous patent? And do they have a different floor for just regular patents? And do they call it regular patents? Like, I don't understand. Their
breakdown that they give us.
I don't understand.
Hey, maybe that's where the guy who wanted to bring the flying carpet for 12 in.
I guess, but what? It's just a weird thing to throw in there. I'm like, okay. You have level 6, which is magical transport, including the flu network that we mentioned earlier for registering for that. Brooms, port keys, and apparition, which we've seen all forms of those already. So obviously the Ministry of Magic does track that in some way, shape, or form. You have level 5, which is international magical cooperation, which involves magical trading, international law, and the International Confederation of Wizards, which, if you've watched the Fantastic Beasts series, that plays a role.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite parts of Fantastic.
You have level 4, magical creatures, including the Beast, Being, and Spirit Division, goblins, and pests. Notice no centaurs in there. I guess they would be under Beast, probably.
Probably, yeah.
If then I was centaur, I'm like, why do the goblins get their own thing and not us? And then now you're creating a division
I'm sure
between
those
two.
are all things. Do you think the Spirit Division is the one who had to like ban Myrtle
100%.
from?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I know we've done a little bit of a deep dive on it before when we talked about like how do you specifically control Myrtle.
Yep.
I have so many questions about the Spirit Division, like endless questions, but I don't think any of us or her have the answers to that yet. Exactly.
I don't think so either.
So we'll belay that for a little bit and get on to level 3. Magical accidents and catastrophes, including magical reversals squad, the Obliviators, and another weird description of muggle-worthy excuses.
Oh, yeah, that was a weird one. I don't understand what that's even supposed to be.
I have no idea what that is.
It feels very anti-muggle.
It must be.
Because it's like excuses. So is that like where people go to try and give their excuses for why they broke some sort of magic law? But then that's called muggle-worthy?
Right, so they're like giving away that this is a joke office potentially because that's derogatory.
Right.
It's just weird.
It's very weird.
Yeah. So I have a bunch of questions about that too. But moving on again.
Because probably no answers.
Level 2, magical law enforcement, where they deal with the improper use of magic, Aurors, the Wizengamot. Yeah. So there's a lot going on there as well. We get into some of the offices here, but I do want to mention before we get into some of the offices, enchanted windows.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Ministry of Magic that came down, essentially a lift into the Ministry of Magic. So Harry poses a question like, aren't we underground? Why is there like sun shining or rain or whatever? And Mr. Weasley literally gives you the explanation of like, oh yeah, maintenance gets to choose whatever they want. Like,
I liked the however many days it was, 2 months of hurricanes.
Right. Because they wanted like better pay or something like that, better benefits. It's an interesting touch. Also, magical maintenance is a very interesting job, I feel like.
Agreed.
I feel like you have to be a really talented wizard for that, because you might see some weird stuff that you have to fix.
All I can think to say is so spoilery. But I agree.
Yes. And I know what you're thinking of, and it would be a spoiler. So anyway, we get into the offices of the Aurors to start off with. And we go by Kingsley's office, which is just an explosion of Sirius Black. It's just Sirius everywhere, and a bunch of red flashing like push pins on a map.
Which sounds super fun and annoying. Like, I feel like I would want them to stop flashing.
Flashing? Yeah, that's fair. And Harry notes that there's an interesting interaction between Kingsley and Arthur. And he's about to say hi to Kingsley and then gets his foot stomped on by Arthur. It's like, dude, do you not realize that this whole thing is undercover?
Yeah, we're not supposed to be friends.
No.
Why would you know Kingsley, Harry?
Yeah, you have no way of knowing this Auror. And especially one so high up in the Auror's office. So it's like, although how is he so high when he can't catch Sirius Black? Like, that's his sole job. And he has all of these posters. You know what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
Like, that's a risk that you run in this.
It is.
Is because...
And if you don't... Well, he sounds like he's pretty good at creating different leads. Like, asking for reports about motorcycles and firearms. Fire feet, I think he calls them.
Fire legs.
Yeah. Oh, legs. So he must do a good enough job of acting like he's finding legitimate leads that they're not worried about it.
Do you ever, because they have a little banter back and forth there, and Kingsley says fire legs, and Arthur's like, well, if you read my report, you know it's firearms. Do you ever think they have that back and forth, and they know it's undercover, but there's a joke in there, and it's like, whoa, too much.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. You went too far there, friend.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, Arthur, watch yourself. Like,
Do you also actually think Kingsley is that high? I mean, I know Tonks says
seniority
when we're
based.
introduced that he's higher up than she is. But I would kind of think that finding Sirius Black would kind of be like you give that to somebody you kind of want out of the way because they clearly didn't find him. They spent an entire year with like this mad search for him, Dementors at Hogwarts.
I get what you're saying.
Nothing ever happened. So do they really think they're going to find him at this point?
I think that's a valid point for sure, and I definitely understand that. The other side of the coin is it's such a high profile that if you do get it, you're made.
That's true.
Forever.
That is very true.
So it's like, I'm sure there are other Aurors trying to prove themselves that would love to have that assignment.
That's true.
But I get your point too of like, it's probably a case just to bury you somewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think, for the record, I don't think that's why Kingsley is on that case. I think Kingsley is well known as a good
there's
Auror,
multiple reasons. But, well, we can get into that too, because there's a whole lot of strings being pulled everywhere. Anyway, we get to Arthur's office, and it's obviously very Muggle themed. There's a toaster that has issues. He gets a memo about
fiddling gloves.
Yeah, fiddling gloves. He gets a memo, which we haven't even talked about, the little flying memos. But he gets a memo of regurgitating toilets that need to be addressed like immediately.
Third one this month.
That seems like a problem.
Yeah.
Do you think he then consults with like maintenance about like, hey, what would you have for this?
Knowing Arthur, yes. Arthur seems to be just on great terms with people throughout the ministry.
He's a people person.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and
people like him.
Anyway, Harry notices the family picture. And we do notice that someone's not in the family picture because they walked out the frame. Percy is not in the family picture. Well, first of all, just the magic of the picture version of Percy understanding the family vibe and being like, I'm not supposed to be here, and just like walks out.
That
it's just intriguing.
A fascinating thing about magic portraits, yes. Before we go into the depths of that relationship, I do just want to say how much I feel like reading this chapter that Arthur was the best possible person who could be bringing Harry to his hearing.
Oh, why do you say that?
Because, and this is why I think it will lead into the discussion with Percy, is because he's just such a great dad. Like, I think, okay, so the other people who were in the room who could have potentially been taking him would have been Sirius, his godfather. Obviously, we all know why he can't.
That would have been awkward, him walking into Kingsley's office with him posted all over.
He wasn't, and he would have been the one to bring Harry. I feel like that wouldn't be a good choice because he's too short-tempered, hot-tempered. Like, with what happens at the end of the chapter, finding out the last-minute change, that would have made him furious. Like, I feel like it would have been bad for Harry's, where he's at psychologically leading into this hearing.
Okay.
Lupin would probably be my second choice because he's calm and trying to like keep Harry calm.
He's not well liked at the ministry either.
He's not well liked at the ministry, and he's maybe a little too serious. Like it would even almost rub off on Harry and make him more anxious.
He'd probably be giving him tips the entire time, and it's like too much.
Right,
like
exactly.
Just, like let it be.
And then there's Molly, who we all know Molly would be probably the worst choice. As much as we love her, too much fussing, too much worry herself. It would just like spiral her. So like, and then there's Arthur, who's just loving his muggles, who's showing him around the ministry, staying calm, but also realizing the importance of getting him down there and also giving tips. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Like he just, which is why him and his son having such a rift is so upsetting.
So Anna, I don't know if you've heard recently on this podcast, but we've kind of had a debate a couple chapters ago where Jen and Julie and I had a debate over which argument was worse. Harry versus Ron and Hermione during their reunion at Grimmauld Place, or the off-page, the second-hand telling of the fight that we had between Arthur and Percy. And the position of Jen and Julie was that Harry's argument, or I guess just yelling at Ron and Hermione, was worse than the fight that essentially broke up a family.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to spin your opinion.
Clearly,
I think it's Percy and Arthur.
My opinion. No, there's just no question in my mind. Like, I don't really understand how you can even try and compare the two. They're so completely different to me. Arthur and Percy, to me, is very clearly worse.
How so? What makes you think the Arthur and Percy?
Well, like you said, it's essentially breaking up a family. Percy is now living in London, not speaking to anybody. He's not even in the family pictures anymore.
Molly cries whenever
I was going to say,
he's somewhat mentioned.
The effect it has that, like, Arthur breaks anything he's holding when he's brought up. The effect Molly accidentally brought up Percy at dinner, Harry's first night at Grimmauld Place, and everybody just froze. And it's heartbreaking when a family is torn apart. And the things that Percy said to Arthur, I can't fathom saying that to my dad. And, like,
not even when you were a teenager, because Percy is
18 by now, 18, 19.
Yeah.
No, I can't fathom saying that to my dad. One, my dad would have not accepted me saying something like that. But also just, and I don't know, maybe I'm biased with, not having my dad anymore. But, like, how do you just, like, throw those personal attacks and then just walk out so unrepentant? And just, like, what if they never they're entering a war? Like, does Percy really not believe Harry? Like, I guess we don't know for sure one way or another. He obviously thinks Molly and Arthur are wrong for choosing Dumbledore's side over Fudge's. But does he really not believe Harry that Voldemort is back? Which I would have all sorts of thoughts about. But assuming, let's say he does think, okay, maybe Voldemort's back. But even if he doesn't, he knows Molly and Arthur are in the Order of the Phoenix. What if they never heal this rift? What if your dad dies in whatever coming war he's getting himself into? And Percy has broken the family and has no way of ever trying to make up for it. He doesn't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Like, to me, that's so much worse than a 15-year-old shouting at his two best friends in the world, and it's over in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I also have a lot of disagreements with Julie and Jen on that we can talk about later, too. But
you want to save those for the spoiler section?
That's fine.
Okay, we can save those for the spoiler section. Right as we're leaving, or right as we're in Arthur's office, we get Perkins coming in. And he's very exasperated, and he's like, I've been looking everywhere for you. They changed the time and the venue of this hearing. You're already like, I think Arthur checks his clock or his watch or whatever, and he's like, we're already 5 minutes late. Like, we got to bolt.
Good first impression.
It's
Poor
interesting.
Harry. What an awful way to, like, go into the hearing panting after a mad dash.
None of this is good.
No.
Which, the next chapter is called The Hearing. So we can get into all of the aspects of the hearing, because Anna will be back for that chapter as well. So we'll get into the aspects of the hearing then, and the venue change, because that's a whole vibe.
For sure.
I think we'll pause it here, and then we'll get into the spoiler section where we have some discussions to be had. We're going to continue with the Percy, Arthur, Harry, Ron, Hermione debate, and you have a bunch that you want to get to from other things, and there's an interesting name dropped in this chapter.
There is.
That I totally forgot
I did too.
existed in this book. So
I did too.
we'll get to that too. So we'll be right back with the spoiler section. All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 7, The Ministry of Magic. And before we get into all of the heavier debates and such, we do want to mention that there was a name dropped in this chapter. We don't get the first name, but it's Rufus Scrimgeour?
I think it's a soft G. Scrimgeour?
Scrimgeour? We're going to go with Scrimgeour for right now. But obviously, he becomes quite a big figure.
It's no big deal.
Yeah. And in the break, we were debating his rise to Minister of Magic, but we think, because his position is not mentioned here, but he's obviously in the Auror office. So head of Aurors.
He's got to be
the head
of
Auror
Auror at this point, yeah.
which will then lead to head of magical law enforcement, which will then lead to the Minister of Magic role, which seems to be a fairly common track to the Minister of Magic, I feel like. Except Barty Crouch didn't take that route
Yeah, I don't
when
think
he
Cornelius
tried.
Fudge was an Auror.
Oh God, I hope not. let's pray.
That'd be terrifying.
I don't know why I feel like that seems to be like a good stepping stone, but I don't know why I feel like that now, but I just do.
I mean, I guess historically, when you're either coming out of a war or going into a war, the world seems to like to put like a military type,
like a general kind of in
charge.
there.
Yeah.
So are we equating him to Eisenhower? Is that what we're
I was
doing?
thinking Grant more, but yeah,
Interesting.
I guess Eisenhower.
Okay, well,
he was my
for all-
second thought.
For all of our international listeners, we're sorry. But anyway, he obviously becomes a big figure, and I personally, I think me and you have had debates on him as a character at points.
Sure.
And we'll get into some Rufus debates, because I think he's a more interesting character than a lot of people actually peg him for.
I think there will be a lot to debate in a few particular chapters when Half-Blood Prince comes around.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's his prime book, but...
He has a couple moments early in Deathly Hallows that I think are very poignant. But, yeah, he's an interesting character, and he's only really... I was stunned that he was mentioned here. I did not remember that at all.
I did not remember that at all, for sure. That was a good name drop.
Yep.
Before we get into the debates...
Yes.
Eric the security guard. Where was
We're back
he?
to Eric the security guard.
Because but this is like a real point.
Okay.
When
your first one was a real point too.
Underage wizards and witches break into the Ministry of Magic to rescue Sirius Black at the end of this novel. Where is Eric the security guard? Why is there no security guard whatsoever?
Okay.
Like they clearly were all given badges for a rescue mission as they came down the visitor's entrance. Why was there no staff anywhere in the Ministry of Magic?
Because I think there were some other things at play going on there. Some other people were also knocking at the door of the Ministry of Magic.
Lucius took out, oh no, is Eric the security guard dead? That'd be so sad.
Now there's real concern for Eric the security guard. Okay, here's how I think this goes. You have two voices in the room. You have Bellatrix, who's like, yeah, let's just take him out. And then you have Lucius, who's like, we could just tell him to take the night off. Like, we don't have to kill everybody, Bellatrix. There's other ways to accomplish the same goals. Like,
oh, gosh.
I think there are those two voices.
What a great picture.
When that mass breakout happens, I think that's essentially Lucius's role as the quote-unquote leader of the Death Eaters at that point, is like corralling the crazy.
Which is what
like
he clearly actually was not good enough at.
Oh, 100%. No, he was not a good... No.
Not good corralling.
Of course, there was some real crazy. There was a lot of crazy there that he had to rein in, but, whatever. Just add Barty Crouch Jr. to that mix, and then that's a whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
That's an explosive mix. Speaking of explosive mixes, we get this explosion of Harry at Ron and Hermione. And you and I, are on the same page as far as...
Shocking.
I know, we're not always on the same page necessarily, or same page, different paragraph. That's okay. That's fine. But we are on the same page here. And for the record, most of the people listening, at least that have participated in the polls, agree with us about Arthur and Percy. As it sits right now, I think it's 19-11 in favor of Arthur and Percy being the worst fight.
It's actually closer than I would have.
It's a little closer than I would have.
Yeah.
The poll, by the way, is still open on that chapter on Spotify, and it will be open for a long time, because we kept it open for a long, long time. So if you want to have your input, go to Spotify under Chapter 4, number 12 Grimmauld Place, and you will find that poll.
Choose wisely.
Choose wisely, choose correctly. So, yeah, we mentioned some of Jen and Julie's points about how the idea that Harry was taking out all of his anger on Ron and Hermione, and they were just kind of taking it, versus Arthur and Percy kind of both dishing out. And I am of the opinion that both people having an input in it makes that argument larger.
Well, especially when you have a father-son, like any sort of relationship, but a father-son relationship is this particular instance where you know the barbs to throw that will hit home.
Yeah. You had a really good point when we were talking, and you just mentioned it. We don't always agree, you and I. And
we do more than we seem like we do on the podcast, but not always, yes.
That is very true. We got through a whole week of Disney, not one argument. It was fine. We agreed on pretty much everything, I think. It was a weird time.
I was very lost.
But yeah, so we've had our disagreements, and we've had our disagreements on this podcast. Mm-hmm. One of our more inflammatory ones was the Trelawney debate from Prisoner of Azkaban. But you made the great point in our pre-episode talk that I think we even yelled at each other. If you go back to that episode, I think we actually raised our voices at each other.
Yeah, no, it got pretty intense.
And here's some behind-the-scenes knowledge. Anna will listen to episodes and give me her unfiltered feedback as to whether I am right or wrong on a topic. And she will let rip. And I will defend myself.
Yes.
And that's okay. Like,
doesn't break our friendship.
She'll come at me hard, and that's okay. And I understand that Harry Potter is not a be-all and end-all as far as friendships go. So I'm okay, and we move on and whatever, and we go hang out, and we grab a drink, and it's fine. And that happens sometimes amongst friends. And as long as it doesn't turn personal and you start saying stuff that you can't shrug off or you can't take back, and then that becomes this thing that only grows and only becomes much more malignant to a relationship, that's where I think it becomes a problem. And I don't think anything Harry said, yes, it was aggressive, yes, it was too much, and yes, it was the wrong way to handle that situation, but he's a 15-year-old kid, and he doesn't have a grasp on all of that yet. Percy and Arthur are, to your point, much more knowledgeable about what ticks the other one has, and they went right for him.
And as far as the Wizarding world is concerned, they're both grown men.
Yeah.
Like, Percy is of age. He's mature enough.
He's
knows
smart.
What
he's a smart kid. Yeah.
And Arthur, obviously. But
yeah, I think it's a little bit more surprising from Arthur, given how we just raved about how calm he is.
Well, I like to imagine that Arthur started out calmly. Like, I imagine he started out being, like, trying to present it in, like, a fatherly advice type way. But it hurt Percy's feelings. Percy got defensive, and then it grew from there.
Right. Yeah. So, it's an interesting debate to have. And I know Jen and Julie want to come on and talk about it again.
Well, I just have all sorts of problems, too, with... I mean, debate which fight you think is worse. Okay. I still am going to stick by the worst is Percy and Arthur. But a lot of the points and the things that upset Jen and Julie about the fight amongst the trio, I just don't flat out agree with either. I don't know where to begin.
Okay.
I guess one of the big points is, I think it was mentioned that Harry is yelling at the wrong people, that Ron and Hermione aren't responsible for the things that Harry's upset about. And okay, kind of, sure. Harry just suffered what I would argue is the most traumatic experience of his life. Like, yes, he was raised an orphan. Yes, his parents were killed when he was 1 year old, but he doesn't have actual memories of that. We've talked before, this was like Cedric dying like right next to him.
He witnessed a murder.
Exactly.
From the man who betrayed his parents to resurrect the man who wants to kill him and wanted to kill his parents.
was physically injured big time, escaped that
Tortured.
Like, so...
There's so much there.
Yeah.
Which we can't comprehend, thankfully.
But then
thankfully, we can't comprehend all of
Exactly. I don't want to ever be able to comprehend all of that. But then after all of that trauma, he's sent back to a house by himself where he was, we've talked before, basically abused his entire life. And he's all by himself. Nobody's telling him anything. And okay, I don't think Harry is even looking for a long letter filled with all the confidential information that could be intercepted via owl. I think Harry's just looking for some acknowledgement, some like, hey, we know you're all by yourself and we can't take you anything, but hey, we're working on getting you to where we are. Just like acknowledge that Ron and Hermione could have done that. I think the reason he yelled so much and all the issues that are taken is just that, like, he hasn't found any sort of coping mechanisms yet. Like, we talked at the beginning of the episode, Harry's angst throughout the book. This is where I'm okay with his angst and his upset because it's just happened. It's still so fresh. And then he was abandoned all by himself by the two people he cares most in the world, Ron and Hermione. So he lets it out. And you know what? You brought up the excellent point. He's 15 years old. I don't blame him for yelling at them so much when he's 15. And the other point, I love you, Jen and Julie, but you kept saying that Ron and Hermione were repeatedly apologizing over and over and over again. I promise you, I triple checked. So the argument begins on page 62. Then there's 5 pages of, part of it is Harry yelling. And a lot of it is what I read as Ron and Hermione just coming up with a lot of very defensive excuses for why they couldn't tell Harry anything. Okay, that's Dumbledore. Okay, that's a big, reason for not telling him anything. But they never apologize. Ron actually never apologizes. But as soon as Hermione apologizes, which, by the way, is on page 66, Harry stops shouting. All the capital letters and shouty caps, they're all gone. Harry's done. He actually stops belaying the point, and that's when he starts asking for information about what's going on with Voldemort, what's going on, what is the Order, where are they? And that's the end of it. As soon as Hermione apologizes, he's done. Yes, I completely agree. Harry could eventually apologize to them for shouting. It's always a nice thing to do.
And I think what we're forgetting is, I think she writes him very realistically. Mm-hmm. Like, some of the vindictive thoughts that he has, I think, are just human.
Yeah.
Like, you just have them.
And I think that's even kind of a trauma response.
Yeah.
Because, again, he hasn't found coping mechanisms yet. And this is where I was kind of hinting at the beginning. He never finds coping mechanisms until Half-Blood Prince. Like, I feel like he could have done a better job with the people who are surrounding him of finding coping mechanisms throughout this book.
He's also trapped, like you mentioned, in the Dursleys. He's literally trapped in nothing but a mind prison. Because all he has is him and his thoughts.
Right, yes.
Which is the worst place to be.
Exactly.
Because nothing good comes from that ever.
Never.
And now you've made a bad situation in your head exponentially worse. And you just relive it constantly.
And I'm sorry, maybe it's not a great thing, but when you're presented with the two, it's not Ron and Hermione's fault. None of it is. But those are the two people he loves most in the world. Those are the two people he trusts most in the world. So it makes sense to me that those are the people who he's going to throw all of that anger at. It's not fair, but trauma is not fair.
So, and I know that the level of hate that Harry gets sometimes, and I have been...
I know, I don't like how often you call him an idiot.
Yeah, I have thrown some shade his way, for sure. I will accept that. But let's be real about it for a second now. Ron and Hermione aren't perfect people either.
Of course, nobody is.
They've had their moments in these first couple of books that you could point to them being like, whoa, you are not being a good friend right now. Yeah. Ron is awful to Hermione throughout the whole first book.
Yes.
Really bad, like to the point of like bullying.
He's also really bad to Harry in Goblet of Fire.
Yeah.
Worse to Hermione, much worse.
And Hermione, I will grant her, has less of those moments. Still has those moments.
She does.
And we don't know how either of them would have handled what Harry just went through.
Exactly.
Which, who knows? And you don't know.
You don't know. There's no way to know.
Yeah.
What we do know of them, I personally would make an argument neither of them would have made it out of that graveyard. But I would hope I would be wrong. But there's just no way to know how they would handle that if they had to live through that like Harry did.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance. Obviously, we get the full blast of that interaction, and the Percy Arthur thing is secondhand. So we don't see how that unfolds and how vicious
But we're
that
going to
got.
see how it unfolds throughout the next few books. It doesn't get better.
And you were hinting at like, well, what if this is the last time Arthur and Percy interact because of what is potentially coming? What eventually brings them back together is a really heartbreaking moment for the family.
Yep.
And you know, Percy does make a choice before that point.
I was going to say, it is a little surprising he didn't, when Arthur gets attacked in this book, it's a little surprising Percy, that doesn't bring him back into the fold a little bit more, but maybe it's because Arthur survives.
Maybe.
Who knows what Percy is going through when that attack happens. He works really hard at the ministry. He puts himself forward a lot. Like, I'm sure he genuinely was really excited about a promotion, thinking like, okay, I'm going to get my life on track. I'm not going to be living in the borough. And maybe he would have been a little more receptive to the idea that, hey, maybe this wasn't entirely garnered on your own if the family's initial response was a little bit more excitement for him. Be like, oh, wow, congrats, Percy. Let him have his little moment. And then be like, so have you ever thought, like, did Fudge tell you exactly how you got this? Like, you're not worried you being used as a spy? Maybe it still happens. Maybe it is a little better taken.
Getting away from the debate for just a little bit, but what do you think so obviously Ginny's a kid, Ron is a kid, the twins close to being adults, but still technically in school. They're on that line. Where do you think Bill and Charlie are on this? Do you think they reached out to Percy and were like, hey, what is going on? Like, because you know Percy, he looks up to them on some level because he worked so hard at Hogwarts to try to match their sterling reputations. So he knows they're legit.
I never thought of Percy working so hard to excel at Hogwarts as him trying to meet their level. I've always viewed Percy as he wants to get to the best level that he can because he just wants.
You think it's his own ambition?
It's his ambition to the point that I think he envisions a better life for himself, that growing up in the borough, struggling for money, the hand-me-down clothes. I think his goal has always been I think he also just loves to learn, but I think he wants to succeed beyond that. And he let a little bit too much of that out in the argument with Arthur. He was cruel in the way he presented that ambition. I can see Bill and Charlie reaching out to him, but I think they got no response. Kind of like how Molly tried to go up to London to talk to him and he wouldn't even open the door.
You don't think Percy would even entertain a conversation with...
No, because I think if he had entertained the conversation, well, maybe, because Ron goes to Bill when he leaves them on the camping trip, and Bill doesn't tell any of the other family. He doesn't throw Ron under the bus to just be brutalized for leaving or Harry and Hermione. So maybe Bill's been in communication. The reason I don't is because Bill is so quick to, when Percy gets mentioned accidentally by Mrs. Weasley at dinner, Bill is the one who gets everybody back on track and things moving again. So I feel like Bill is focused on, as the oldest child, trying to keep his parents, specifically
trying to keep everything together. I think, and I know that's the first time I think I've ever really considered, like, what's Bill and Charlie's role in this?
Which maybe Bill and Charlie are just as mad in a mature way, just as mad at Percy, of being like, hey man, cool, we wanted to better ourselves too, but you don't do that to Dad.
Yeah.
And so maybe they're just as disappointed in him. They don't really, they're going to let Percy fix it on his own.
I mean, I get Charlie's abroad,
Mhm.
so maybe he's
We know
detached
the
from
least
this
about him too,
Right.
and how he would handle something like
personality
that.
and the whole bit. Yeah. So, Bill being there, I think he's got to take that kind of leadership role, and he's probably in that uncomfortable position. And I feel like you've been in this position, I've been in this position, other people have been in this position where it's like, at a certain age, parents start leaning on you a little bit to start, get let in to the drama and the dynamics a little bit more of what's going on in the family or what's going on, around their atmosphere. And it's never comfortable, but you always have to somehow weather it.
Yeah.
And I think Bill's a wonderful example of how you could weather it, because I think he's got all the characteristics to do it well.
He seems a very just even-keeled ship. Like, he just rides out any waves. Nobody ever really gets upset with Bill. And
No,
Bill doesn't really
other
get
than
upset
Molly
with
about his
people.
ponytail. But
and the earring.
Yeah. I think, especially with Bill being like at Gringotts and having that academic status at Hogwarts for so long, I think Percy would look at him and be like, that's closer to what I want to be than like Arthur.
Oh, agreed. Agreed.
But yeah, I think it's I just never thought of Bill and Charlie's role in this whole thing until now.
Me neither.
But
it's an interesting question.
And obviously we know the twins' perspective, being close to that adult line, and their relationship with Arthur is very close.
Yes.
So they are aggressively defensive.
Very tight. But they also were always the cruelest to Percy too.
True.
They're the ones who are saying the things of like, oh, no, great loss. And,
I think Percy's never been super fond of them either.
How could you be?
Like, it's like it's a whole thing.
Say things like that. It is.
It's a whole back and forth. Yeah. Like, that's a chicken and the egg thing. Like, I don't know what really started that. That could be like a circular, never-ending. So yeah. Do you have any other comments, either on the Arthur Percy, Harry, Ron, Hermione thing, or any other general?
I don't think so.
It's a lot. Let us know what you guys think about all of it. Participate in the poll. Yeah. That's your way of directly telling us. Other than commenting on Twitter, you're always welcome to comment on Twitter, Instagram.
This is one of our more personal polls.
Yeah, it's a little insight as to kind of where you're at on the whole dynamic. You can also comment on Spotify, and we will give you a shout out, and we will let Jen and Julie know what you think, because they're very anxious to get back on and get back into this. So, but yeah, I think that'll wrap this episode up, and we will get on to Chapter 8, The Hearing.
Woo!
So we will be right back next week. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.